Trowel Talk Warriors, I hope you're doing good. We have received a ton of questions about this product, fiberglass mesh. Where'd you get it from? Does it really stop cracks? Blah blah blah, and a ton of other fucking questions. In this video, we're going to break it down. We're going to go into detail, fiberglass mesh. Let's go. Okay guys, so you're re-skimming an older property. Now the walls, although maybe a bit fragile in places, overall they're pretty good. Now the plaster's old, but it's not blown. So let's have a look here. It's old, but it's not blown, okay? Now, what tends to happen is you get these horrible hairline cracks. Let's see if the camera can pick up some of these hairlines. You might not be able to see them, but there's hairline cracks and crazing, okay, throughout the skim, all over the skim coat. And where the electricians come in is disturb some of this aging plaster, which has potentially loosened some of it off. So what do? We take an old trowel, we scrape everything back, we remove any loose paint, for example, this kind of stuff, okay? Again, very fragile in places, but overall, not too bad. Now, we typically scrape back glue, bond out the pockets and the chases and the areas that are a bit weak. And then we two coat skim and everything's fine and it looks lovely and it's sound. And then you get a call maybe 3 months later when the weather turns. Hi, I've got a horrible hairline crack that's appeared. It's appeared on the stairs wall, it's appeared above a door. There's a hairline crack behind the radiator. This is a phone call that we've all possibly had. I used to get a lot of these phone calls, and I used to think to myself, if only there was a product that would stop these horrible hairline cracks from popping through, we could guarantee our work, we'd have no comebacks, no callbacks, and it's a win-win. The customer gets a flawless finish with no cracks, and we don't get hassled, and it improves our reputation. Now, let's go and talk about this. Fiberglass mesh. Since this product's come out, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, we've been using it for around 9 years. Since we've been trialing this product, we've not had not one callback for issues with hairline cracks. I don't know about you, but that gives this a pretty good track record for crack prevention. So I've just explained to you why we use it. Now let's talk about where we'd use it. So again, we're moving through old properties. I've just spotted a crack actually, I can show you. Let's have a look at this one here. Here's a typical example of where fiberglass mesh is going to come in really, really handy. Reinforce your skim coat and prevent cracks coming through. Now, where else could you use this product? Well, over the last decade, we've used this mesh in a number of different situations, including external renders, sand and cement, lath and plaster. If you've got a lath and plaster wall, or even a ceiling, let's say for example you've got original cornicing, original ceiling roses on an old Georgian or Victorian property, your customer doesn't fancy ripping all that away and reboarding. As long as your lath and plaster is in sound condition, you might have some hairline cracks, some surface cracking, but overall the surface is sound, it's not blown, then this product comes in to play and you're able to again create that durable surface when you're re-skimming. So awesome for lath and plaster, fantastic for external renders, including acrylic renders, sand and cement renders. There's guys I know that have even used it on the new resin render internally. We've used this product when we've done some floor tiling. So for example, if you've got a bathroom floor, you've ply lined it with a 4mm ply or a 10mm ply, and you've primed it ready to take your floor tiles using the flexible adhesive. You can put another measure in there just to make sure that you don't get any tiles cracking or popping down the line. And what you can do is put a skin of floor tile adhesive down, embed this mesh into that layer. Once that picks up, then put your actual bed of adhesive down before tiling. So there's a number of areas and a number of situations where this fiberglass mesh enhances not only the finish but the lifespan of your material by preventing these hairline cracks. So very versatile product that can be used in a number of situations in the building trade. Now we're using this product on most reskim jobs now, guys, most reskims. The reason for that is not only are we working in older properties, but one of the challenges when you're reskimming, if you're a spread you'll know this, is we do tend to skim over a lot of painted surfaces. Now painted surfaces can look fine at a glance and you think, okay, PVA and skim, everything's fine, but oftentimes it's what's happening behind the paint. And I just wanted to give you an example of what I mean here. So the paint don't look too bad, okay, a little bit ropey, but chipping away at the surface a little bit, you can see here behind the paint is quite a prominent crack running right through above the window. If we can't see that, chances are we're going to skim that, and again, as soon as there's a little bit of temperature shift, that's going to splinter straight through the new skim. So that's the reason why we're using this product now on most reskims, guys. Now you might be thinking, well Stu, why don't you just cover the whole wall in 100mm scrim? Now that is an option and it will give you a degree of crack resistance, but the issue with scrim is it's just that bit too weak. Under intense stress it's going to fail and it's going to fall away. I've just tore a hole in it with my fingers. The fiberglass mesh, it is so strong. There's a tiny little offcut here. It is absolutely, you're not going to rip this stuff with your fingers. It is so strong, and that's why it's able to hold back those cracks much better than any self-adhesive scrim tape. Is it a magic wand? Are you going to be able to go into a property where the plaster's literally hanging off the wall and, you know, hanging on for dear life? No, you're not going to be able to go in there, slap some of this stuff over the top and hey presto, you know, the blown plaster goes away. That's not going to happen. If your plaster's blown and it's clearly loose and hanging off the wall, don't use this product because the plaster's too far gone. It's not going to take another skim, and by you putting this on top, you're just asking for trouble, and that is a very cowboy thing to do. So we're not saying to you go into old houses where the plaster's hanging off, slap a bit of this over and skim, which is a bit of a misconception that comes up when we talk about this product. So I wanted to clear that up on the get-go, that you can't use this product if your plaster's shot to bits, okay? You're gonna have to come off. You're gonna have to go back to brick and start again. Although fiberglass mesh is a relatively new product, it's not a new concept. It's actually a fundamental part of plastering, and as you know, there's no new fundamentals. So back in the day, before plastic was something we used, plasterers would use this stuff here, and it's called hessian, And essentially what this stuff does is it does the same job as fiberglass mesh. So they would embed this stuff into wet plaster, or they would lay it down over areas that would be subject to stress or prone for cracking. For example, over window lintels, around door frames, anywhere where the plasterer thought this area is going to be a stress point, they would use this hessian. It's very, very similar looking. If I was to try and strip this away and show you, if you have a look at that, it is almost identical to today's fiberglass mesh. It's even woven in the same way. Okay, and this property is like fucking 100 years old. So although fiberglass mesh is quite new, it's not a new idea. And the idea is to reinforce that plaster, because as you know, plaster's very, very weak, fragile, almost like a stick of chalk, really. So as soon as it's subject to any kind of stress at all, for example, break it up in your fingers, it just falls away. Any kind of movement, plaster's just going to crumble away and crack. And that's why we embed the mesh, to try and reinforce it and almost give it a kind of semi-flexible skin. So I've bonded out these chases, guys. Okay, I'm just wetting this area where there was a little bit of backing paper, where the radiator was, and then we're going to apply a good strong mix of PVA glue. If you're unfamiliar with these methods that I've just described, things like bonding coat and prep works, then check out some of my other videos on the channel, or by all means check out some of the other guys' channels, which may be more appropriate and more suited to what you're looking for. Alex Morley, Blaine Gray, Mac, they do some fantastic demonstrational videos on preparation works, plastering for beginners. Or again, just scroll through my previous videos and you'll see some guidance on that. But assuming you know a bit about plastering and you've got your chases all bonded up, we're going to get this paper off, we're going to get the glue on, and then I'll show you what we do with this stuff. Alright, so we're just getting our primer on, our PVA. I know what you're thinking, why is it grey? Well, this is an old batch from last week where we had a run of Artex ceilings which were white gloss paint, almost like a glossy silk finish. So if you've watched any of the videos, you'll know that sometimes if we're applying our glue over a white shiny surface, we'll often put additives into the PVA which help us to see where we're going, make sure we've got no misses. So this has had a few handfuls of cement, which is why it's got that grey colour, guys. When it comes to primers, you can use whatever primer suits you. Okay, my preference is PVA. I've used PVA for 21 years. It's only let me down once, and that was a fault of my own, where I diluted the PVA down way too much. Again, that was over an Artex ceiling, and unfortunately the skim did delaminate off the ceiling. Lesson learned, schoolboy error. Only did it once, but yeah, always make sure that you have a nice thick mixture of PVA glue. Some spreads like to actually put it on neat. If you're familiar with Eric de Valmency, plaster.org, or his regular show Ask the Plasterer, you'll know that Eric likes to use neat PVA, straight out of the tub, no water. And again, if you've ever had a job delaminate on you, you'll understand why he chooses to do that, and it gives him a fail-safe way of making sure that that never happens, and make sure that your work's pretty bulletproof and bonded on real good to whatever surface you're going on to. So but yeah, SBR, blue grit, whatever you want to use. My preference again is PVA. Get it all PVA'd up. I'm going to cut in along the top, and then we'll go on to the next step, which is fixing on the mesh. Okay, now I'm anticipating your questions, and I'm guessing one of them's going to be which brand to use, where to get it from. Now, I'm not affiliated with any suppliers, okay, and as you know, most of my gear is sourced online, so I'll usually go on eBay or a couple of other sites that I use, and I'll just price shop around, and I'll see what the best deals are at any given time, usually eBay. Now, we've used cheap mesh, we've used the top end mesh, for example Weber, and the brand that I like and the brand that I tend to go for most times is Drywall Master. Now, why do I choose this one? Well, not only is it excellent value for money, but mostly it's the quality. So over the last X amount of years, I've never had an issue with Drywall Master, whereas some of the other cheaper brands, I can't remember the name of them, but we have had some cheap stuff in the past where the stuff's let us down, either by fraying, by falling away when we've tried to unravel it, or in one situation we actually had multiple offcuts that were rolled together on a roll. So then when we unravelled the mesh, it just come apart in 1 metre strips, which was quite hilarious. So what I'd say is just be wary of the real cheap stuff, because it can trip you up. And again, you can use the top end stuff, but unless you're doing you know, external render systems where the manufacturer offers you that warranty by using, say for example, Weber systems, there's no real need to be paying £60–70 per roll for this stuff, guys. You can pick this stuff up if you buy in bulk for maybe 35 quid a roll, between 30 and 35 quid at the moment. So if you buy 5 rolls, Drywall Master on eBay for example, you can maybe get 5 rolls at 34 quid, £35 per roll. A 50 metre roll, I think, yeah, 50 metre rolls, and it is alkaline resistant, guys, this one, so you can use it internally and externally. So again, I'm not affiliated with Drywall Master. You know, there's options out there. You could use Plaster's one-stop shop. You've got the Premier Render Supplies. I'm not affiliated with any of these people. You'll know who they are. They're popular suppliers. It's a case of getting on the phone and seeing what they can do for you, but again, I tend to go online and see what I can get. But yeah, you can't go far wrong with Drywall Master. Now then, let's get stuck into the nitty gritty, because I know that's why you're here. You want to know how do you fix it on the wall, and how do you plaster it in and bed it in. So if you watch YouTube vids on mesh, you'll usually see guys spreading their first coat of gear on, and then they'll roll out the mesh and they'll embed it into the wall after the gear is on. Now that's a good way of embedding the mesh. We don't do it like that unless we're doing sand and cement, but I'll talk about that later. What we do is we prep the wall, and then we actually staple this mesh in place using these 8mm arrow staples, guys. Okay, so we've got the arrow rechargeable stapler here, and just to demonstrate, so we'll roll out the mesh in lengths, okay, and we'll start at the top. We'll maybe tack in 4 or 5 staples along the top of the mesh, okay? And then we'll let that mesh drape down. Any sockets and things like that we'll knife round. Architraves, trims, just butt your mesh up to the edge like you would with scrim tape, okay? And the reason that we do it like this, I'll set you up on a time lapse in a minute just to sort of speed through and show you, but what we're looking at doing is having a 50mm overlap on the mesh, okay? And yeah, the reason that we do it like this is because not only is it more efficient and you'll get a cleaner, tighter finish, so you can go right up to your trims, you can knife around all your sockets real neat. If you've got your skirting board, you can knife across and have it real neat, ready to go. But the other reason that we do it is because if you're laying on your gear and then you're picking up your mesh and then embedding that into the wet plaster, not only is your plaster going off while you're pottering around trying to get it in place and, you know, trying to hold it in, trying to bed it in on your own and all the rest of it, but we find that you're going over your work twice. So you've already been over the whole wall laying on, then you've got to put the mesh into place and go over the whole wall again with your trowel. So you're sort of doing things twice, if you like. So doing it like this, I'm not saying this is the best way, the right way or the only way. It's just how I do it, okay? It's not set in stone. It's not written in any law that you have to do it like this. It's just what we do. We find if you do it like this, although it is slower laying on, you're only laying on once, not laying on and then going over the whole wall again with your trowel to bed in. So you're sort of bedding in and laying on in one pass. But anyway, I'll set you up on a time lapse so you can get a visual of what I'm doing, and we'll revisit once we've knocked up the first coat and I'll show you how we bed it in. And I'll just rip down this edge. Again, make sure that your overhang is around 50mm. Hasn't got to be you know, pinpoint accurate or anything like that. But the guidance is around 50mm overhang. So yeah, nice sharp knife, nice new Stanley blade. Decorating scissors are good for this as well, but we find for things like knifing out around your sockets and what have you, nice sharp blade on your Stanley knife. Once you've done a few of these jobs, you can fly. I mean, we've got the advantage that the ceiling's low here. But yeah, once you've done a few, the mesh does fly up, and obviously just make sure you do knife out all your sockets, you don't miss any, because if you're rushing and flying about with your trowel, sometimes you can fill these up. If you've meshed over it, you don't see it. Obviously, yeah, just make sure you've knifed out all your sockets and whatnot. And that's how easy it is to fix in place. Again, the reason that we attach the mesh onto the wall and not bed it in once the gear's on, just to get this accuracy, so we can get it real tight. Once your plaster's already on the wall, it's a bit of a faff and it's a bit of a messy game, especially knifing round everything. So again, give it a go. We find this is the most efficient system for us. So we've got our first coat of gear mixed up. We've got our speed skim to hand, which is going to come into play a little bit later on. I'm going to pop you on a time lapse. We'll get this first coat on. Now you'll see that when I'm laying on the gear, I will be laying on the gear differently to if the mesh wasn't there, basically. So typically we'd be doing big sweeps. You can't do that if the mesh is on the wall. So we start at the top and we're doing short stumpy sweeps. And the idea is to bed the mesh in and lay on at the same time, so bedding the mesh in as we go. Again, start from the top down, but I'll stick you on a time lapse now and you can see exactly what I mean. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a band of plaster along the top of the wall. Now again, if the mesh weren't on there, you'd probably start somewhere near the bottom, and I'll just apply big sweeps of gear all the way along. Now, we can't do that because if we start at the bottom, the mesh is going to bunch up, and it's going to just bunch up everywhere, and it's going to be a nightmare. So that's why we work from the very top, and we work down with the trowel. And again, the idea is as we're laying the gear on, we're embedding the mesh at the same time. So we're trying to sort of iron out any bunching that might happen in the mesh. So that's why we work from the top and we work down to the bottom of the wall. So again, we're doing shorter sweeps. And we're really compressing that gear into the mesh, making sure that there's no bunching up of the mesh and it's nice and flat. So we're laying on and bedding in at the same time. As you can probably tell, this gear is quite sticky. There's a lot of body to it. And the reason for that is we put a good few handfuls of bonding coat, and that goes in the first mix, the first coat. And it gives the gear a little bit of body, a little bit of additional thickness, just to get over the mesh, which isn't very thick. You could do this without bonding coat, but we do find it just gives that lovely velvety cushion when you're laying onto this gear. And again, we tend to do this a lot anyway in the old houses. If there's any little discrepancies in the wall, we tend to iron them out in the first coat using this method and the speed skim, so that when that second finish coat goes on, your base coat is 100% and you know you're going to get that flawless finish. So the first coat's laid on. Next step is a quick pass with the speed skim, just like you would in your normal plastering. So just spat it all, speed skim it all, or trowel it, whatever you prefer to do. We love these, and we find that they make meshing a dream. Same as if you've got like an Artex ceiling and you give it a first flash over with the speed skim, you'll know what I mean. It just gives it a nice, easy, flat enough. Cutting all the edges, cup of tea, and then we're going to hit it with the next coat. But there's a stage between that we'll talk about. Alright guys, you've applied and you've flattened your first coat of gear, and we're going to clean the edges up. I'm going to get set up for the second coat. But there's an important stage of the game when you're using mesh. If you overlook this, it could trip you up later on. So we're going to talk about fraying, and we're going to talk about the joints. So one of the issues with fiberglass mesh when you're using this, particularly internally, because your skim coats are quite thin, you can get this carry on happening. And what it is, it's the edge of the mesh, which sometimes, a bit like when you get a scrim that frays, you can get this fraying that happens on the joint. So you can see one there, and there's a more prominent one here. Okay, now if we just trowel that up, leave it and get the next coat on, there's a good chance that these little burrs that you can see here, there's a good chance that that could come through the next coat, which can happen. And sometimes they can come through the top coat, your finish coat, and you can feel them with your fingertips. And some people say, you know, put a lighter to them and melt them off and all this jazz, but it's not something you want to be doing really when you finish the job. scorching the walls and what have you. So we've got a little tip for you to deal with this issue of the mesh fraying on the edges and coming through, and I'll describe how we do that now. Okay, now to get over this issue, it's an easy fix, guys. It's a case of letting your gear pick up a little bit. All right, you just see my fingerprints there. It's just starting to pick up. Lay some scrim tape directly over those burrs that are poking through. Just show you properly. There we go. Bed the scrim down, and it will hold back those burrs that are poking through the mesh. I'm just using this little Venetian trowel that sometimes comes in handy for margins and stuff, just to demonstrate. But you can use, obviously you could use any trowel, use normal Marshalltown or whatever it is you like to use. Just check all your seams and your joints. Make sure that none of the mesh is poking through like I've just shown. Again, if it does poke through on the joints, just lay some scrim over the top. Bed that down while the gear is still workable. And they'll disappear. You might find that your first coat will hang a little bit more than usual when you've got the mesh in there, and I think the reason for that is because it's obviously plastic and you're covering quite a lot of the wall surface, and plastic's you know, impermeable, so it's not gonna, it's gonna kill the suction a little bit for you, but not too much. Maybe give you another 20 minutes or whatever. So bad news for those of you that like to top with the same mix. We don't do that anyway. We're traditional first coat and then a fresh mix for second coat. I'm not knocking people's methods. I know a lot of top spreads that like to lay on a tight coat and then use the same gear to top. So, but you might find if you try to do that using the this mesh system, it's going to be too wet for you to top with the same gear, and risk of the mesh coming through the plaster. So just a heads up for you there, you likely will need to do 2 fresh mixes. So get your first one on, clean down your edges, flatten off, check your seams, make sure your mesh is fully bedded in, there's no mesh protruding. Cut in your edges. Once it's firmed up enough, nice wet mix over the top. So I'm going to have a brew, and I'm going to get the second coat on, because you don't want to watch me doing that because it's boring. The main point of this video is to show you how to fix, trim the mesh, and get it bedded in with your first coat. I might just lob a quick time lapse on for you with me chucking on the top coat, and then we'll have a chat at the end and I'll show you the finished job. Coming towards the end of this set here now, guys. I'm not going to bore you with the whole troweling up, polishing and all the rest of it, because we've got other videos on skimming, but you can see here that the idea is to lose all the mesh on the first coat. Okay, make sure it's fully bedded in, there's no fraying and there's no joints poking through. As long as you've covered that base, fire on your second coat, your top coat, and it'll go on just like any other wall that you're doing in, you know, your normal plastering. So here's one that we've done a few days ago. Go over here on the light. As you can see, this is dry, or pretty much dry. I'll try and get in real close for you, but you shouldn't be able to see any of the mesh, and you can just polish it up as though you would any other wall, and Again, no mesh should be coming through that, that top coat of skim, and it will just skim up like any other wall. The only difference being is that it won't crack. On the channel, I won't promote any products that are shit. You're not going to get any BS with Trowel Talk. So I'm only going to talk about products that we use and that work. So I hope this video has been helpful for you and giving you a bit of an insight into fiberglass mesh. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing that. We'd really appreciate it, and don't forget to join the Facebook group. Have a good one, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, guys. Introducing Trowel Talk Facebook live stream, guys. If you've not already joined the Facebook group, jump on there for your chance to listen to some good interviews with some influential people within the plastering trade. Join the group and don't miss out. See you next time.